Hey college football fans, episode 38 of Walk It Off with Chappy. Happy 4th of July to you. And this one's for Boston, for Boston. That's right, Boston College Screaming Eagles, Flying Eagles, whatever you want to call them. They're the Eagles out of Chestnut Hill. And so we're going to look at how I think that they're going to fare in 2022. So let's start on the offensive side. They have a new offensive coordinator, John McNulty. He's replacing Frank Cignetti Jr., who went elsewhere, actually went over to Pitt, so staying within the conference. And McNulty's got a pretty good quarterback on his hands, although Phil Jurkovec took a step back last year. He also broke his wrist last year, limiting his play to just 6 games. But he completed only 54% of his passes, a 7-4 touchdown to interception ratio, just 150-some passing yards per game. So his play is going to need to rise, especially in the passing game. He's got some good wheels. He actually was their second leading rusher on the season and had the highest yards per carry average at 6.4. Pretty versatile, pretty mobile in the backfield. All ACC running back Patrick Garwo comes back, and a lot of BC fans are going to point to this running back room being pretty talented. But when you look at the numbers, Garwo, yeah, he made all ACC, but the numbers don't jump off the page at me. 5.1 yards per carry, respectable, 87 yards per game, 7 touchdowns. But beyond that, I'm not completely sold on Alex Sinkfield and Xavier Coleman being that definite number 2 punch. I actually like Coleman a little bit better than Sinkfield. I'm hoping to see him get on the field and really illustrate himself as the back of the future for Boston College. You look at the receivers, Zay Flowers, mad props to this dude for staying. He was tempted and prompted with 6-figure NIL deals, but he decided to keep his services in Chestnut Hill and really cites his dad, who encouraged him to stay loyal and to kind of finish what you start and don't always be tempted by the potential of greener grass. He's joined by Jalen Gill and Jaden Williams. So Flowers had 5 receiving touchdowns a year ago, averaged 17 yards per carry. He's also a great fly sweeper, so they're going to give him the ball out in space and let him do his thing. Williams was actually their second leading pass catcher of touchdowns. He had 3 a year ago, and Gill was a former transfer from Ohio State, somebody who brings some speed to the outside. They bring in a good transfer in George Takix from Notre Dame at tight end to join Joey Luchetti. So those two can make a serviceable pair of tight ends. Now up front, this is where I have my big concerns. So they only brought back 1 of 5 starters a year ago, and we can cross him off now because Christian Mahogany unfortunately suffered an ACL injury this spring, early summer session, and so now they're going to be having 5 new starters on that offensive front. Though Drew Kendall, a redshirt freshman, they're really high on. He was a highly touted recruit. His dad played offensive line at Boston College. I believe he was certainly all Big East, may have even been an All-American Pete, but flanking him, they're going to need to find some viable replacements to make things sturdy for Phil Jurkovec and that running back room with Garwo and Sinkfield and Coleman. Now, people also talk about the talent that they had on the offensive line at BC last year, which is traditionally known as O-line U. And yeah, they were talented, but they were not so productive last year. I mean, look at these numbers. They were 59th in rush offense, which is pretty good. 61st, though, in sacks allowed nationally. 104th in tackles for loss allowed. And again, that's with an all-ACC running back and a mobile quarterback who averaged 6 yards per carry. So if those are the numbers that they end up with, doesn't really scream as productive as people pointed out to be. And again, they've got 5 new guys on that offensive front, so clearly going to need to shore that up. Moving over to the defense, this is where Boston College will be able to hang their hat this year. So they return a lot on this side of the ball, which helps. And they were top 35 a season ago in total defense, scoring defense, pass defense efficiency, and red zone defense. All good categories you want to be a stellar group in. They do need to get better at stopping the run. They were 93rd nationally a year ago, but again, with a lot of guys returning, a lot of experience returning, and one of the best and hottest coaches in the coordinating ranks, Tim Lukabu. Remember that name, even if sometimes people can't pronounce it that well, you're going to remember it and you're going to hear that a lot, because in his third year now running the defense for Jeff Hafley's Eagles, he's done some great things and certainly will be looked at to being promoted very soon. They return their top 4 tacklers, BC does, and much of their back 7, which as we know is Jeff Hafley's specialty from a coaching perspective. Linebackers Cam Arnold and Vinny DePalma are stout. And then you add in Bryce Steele, who many feel is the future of the Boston College defense. And then Jalen Blackwell is going to get a lot of time on that side of the ball this year as well, redshirt freshman outside linebacker. Josh DeBerry, a corner/nickel, is quite possibly their best defensive player. He was all ACC a year ago, one of the better DBs in the conference. 53 tackles a year ago, and 38 of those he did on his own, a really high solo tackle percentage. 8 TFLs, 4 quarterback hurries, and then he also picked off 2 throws and knocked away 3 others. He's joined in the secondary by Jaden Woodbay and Jason Mader, who help in pass defense, as do cornerbacks Elijah Jones and rising sophomore CJ Burton. And then up front, defensive ends, they've got 2 pretty good ones in Marcus Valdez, who had 5 sacks a season ago, and then Shata Salah will also be able to provide pressure. So if healthy, those 2 DNs could create some havoc in opposing backfields. And then in special teams, place kicker Connor Litton was really good, 11 of 12 in field goals a year ago, and I think about 8 of those 11 came from beyond 30 yards. Where he was perfect in 40 to 49 and only missed 1 from the 30 to 39 range. Now the schedule. This is where I have reservations, and this is why I'm hesitant to put Boston College as a team that can legitimately compete in that Atlantic division. So they host Rutgers in the opening week, but then they have to go to Virginia Tech. They host Maine. Then they're at Florida State, where they've lost 10 of the last 11 to that team, whether it's home or away. They host Louisville, and they host Clemson in that red bandana game for Welles Crowther. That's also their homecoming game. So very tough start out of the gate. But if they can win 2 of the 3 against the Hokies, the Seminoles, or the Cardinal, after a bye week, they travel to Wake Forest, where the road team has won the last 7 games in this series. They play at UConn, which you would hope is a win, as will be an expected win hosting Duke the following game. Then they go to NC State, where the road team is 5-2 in the last 7 matchups between those 2 schools. At Notre Dame, which is presumably a loss. That's going to be a good Notre Dame team this year. And then they host Syracuse at the end. So I see a 5-7 record with 3-5 in the ACC. But again, there's the possibility that they could steal 2 or 3 of those games that I'm looking at as a potential loss. Again, at Virginia Tech, at Florida State, Louisville, who I think is going to be a much improved team in the Atlantic this year. But again, if they don't get their act together early on, Louisville that is, they could catch a BC team that is pretty hot, especially if they steal 1 or 2 against Virginia Tech or Florida State. And then again, also traveling to NC State, who I think is getting a lot of preseason love, but I don't know that they're warranting being a potential college football playoff contender, or even somebody who can upseat Clemson. Clemson's going to be really, really good this year in the Atlantic. They are definitely back, ladies and gentlemen. So again, I see a 5-7 record for the Eagles, but possibly 7 or 8 wins. I like what Hafley's doing, and as a program, I love BC. And on this 4th of July, I want to say a big thank you to the parents of Welles Crowther, the man for whom the red bandana game is designed after and honoring. Again, that's for homecoming against Clemson this year out at Chestnut Hill. But Mr. and Mrs. Crowther, thank you for raising your young man the right way. His act of bravery and heroism and self-sacrifice and just doing what's right. You know, I always think of the quote, "Be the good you want to see in the world," and Welles Crowther certainly was. So again, on this 4th of July, where we honor America and we honor those who do well for America, Welles Crowther and the things that he did on September 11th, 2001, and all the good reasons why we honor him. I thank you, and I salute all of you BC fans for the good and the red that is the red, white, and blue of the United States of America. I'm Chappy. This is what I know. Happy 4th, everybody.